I'm never sure if I ever wanted to do what I'm doing. It was definitely not a plan. Our old CEO at the time, he said to me, like, you need to change. You need to do something differently because you're a one-trick pony. And I was thinking, oh, I quite like being this one-trick pony because I've started in a team, I've grown the team, I'm now managed the team, I'm now manager of managers even, I think, at the time. And his point, he said to me at the time, he was like, you will never be CTO if you don't change. And I was like, well, I don't want to be CTO, but okay, I'm going to listen to him. I respect him. He's a smart person. And so I moved teams. And it was the first time where I'd properly come out of my comfort zone.
Leading and scaling a business isn't hard because you lack ideas. It's hard because your time, your team's time, and your focus get eaten alive by the daily grind. Too many leaders are overwhelmed, under pressure, and bogged down by low-leverage tasks. I've learned this the hard way, scaling Nobody Studios, advising fast-growing startups and Fortune 500s, all while leading multiple ventures at once. I've seen firsthand how even the best executives get buried in meetings, lose strategic visibility, and burn out just trying to keep up. That's why I built the AI Executive Coaching Program, the same frameworks and tools that I've used in my own work to make it more meaningful, better leveraged, and more impactful. We're helping leaders in global businesses get hours back every week, turning chaos into clarity and operating with more leverage than ever before. This isn't theory. This is about identifying the traits you need to unlearn, the tasks pivotal to your success, and the tools that can be built into workflows to optimize your capabilities every day. From transforming meeting scripts into transcripts, into action plans, and spotting performance patterns you can't see on your own, we're upgrading the way executives lead. If you want to scale without losing your edge, let's talk. You'd be surprised how quickly you can lead at a whole new level.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast.
Today's guest is someone I've had the privilege of knowing and working alongside well over a decade ago. Andrew Phillips is a Chief Technology Officer at Skyscanner, but his story doesn't start in the C-suite. It starts as a graduate, joining a fast-growing travel startup in Edinburgh, back when Skyscanner was still finding its feet and the engineering team could fit in a single room. Andrew and I met in those early days when Skyscanner was scaling rapidly, experimenting with continuous delivery, product-centric teams, and learning, sometimes the hard way, what it really takes to build technology at scale. Even then, Andrew stood out, calm, thoughtful, deeply curious, and always willing to step into uncertainty. What's remarkable about his journey, that becoming CTO was never really part of his plan. Instead, he kept choosing growth over comfort, moving across teams, unlearning old identities, and deliberately putting himself back in the beginner mode. Those moments of intentional discomfort became the foundation of his leadership. So in this conversation, we explore Andrew's journey from graduate engineer to CTO of one of the world's most trusted travel platforms, how deliberately changing roles shaped his leadership, empathy, and decision-making, how he's using AI personally, not just to be more productive, but to be more present, thoughtful, and effective, the personal AI stack he's built up over time, from voice notes to prototyping apps in parallel of doing key meetings, and why clarity, direction, and directed autonomy matter more than ever in the AI world, and how leaders can use it to deepen their connection to the teams, not distance themselves from the work. This is a conversation about unlearning rigid roles and reconnecting with outcomes. Andrew's honest pragmatism and lived experience from the front lines is really something quite unique, and I'm excited to share this story with you.
This is in many ways a little bit of a trip doing this podcast, considering we met, God, it's going to scare me saying it out loud, probably over 15, maybe 14 years ago. When you were one of those people in Skyscanner in the earliest days of the company growing. You had been, I think you came through the grad program. Is that right? Is that how you joined in? Yeah.
I'm not even sure we had a grad program at the time. But I was a grad. It was my first job at uni, and it's been quite a wild rocket ship or roller coaster or something.
I think a bit of both for sure, but one of the things when I met you instantly though is you have this very calm sort of demeanor, and I even remember people in the team going, oh yeah, he's going to be the CTO one day. And here we are, as you say, 14, 15 years later, and you've been doing the role for a while. So for many people, they're probably looking like, how do you go from, being a grad in Edinburgh to now like leading, one of the most well-established and recognized travel businesses on the planet? Maybe, is there a moment when you look back, it didn't maybe mean a lot at the time, but in retrospect, you're like, this was a real key moment that helped me, figure out what I wanted to be doing, even to today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never sure if I ever wanted to do what I'm doing, because it was definitely not a plan, shall we say. I love my job, for the record, but it is. The plan was never like get to CTO. It was always just do the right thing. Work hard and see what kind of journey, where the journey takes you. I think the thing that really sticks with me now, looking back, is, and it was probably 8-9 years ago or so, when I was a manager of a team at the time. So I'd gone through the kind of IC coding to manager change, which is always, I think for most people, is one of the hardest changes. Just because you have to rewire what your kind of self-worth and value are. Like, it used to be lines of code impact, in that way. Not that lines of code is a good measure of delivery, but at least you knew what you were doing, right? You could see what you were doing, to being a manager. But then our old CEO at the time, he said to me, like, you need to change. You need to do something differently, because you're a one-trick pony. And I was thinking, I quite like being this one-trick pony, because I've started in a team, I've grown the team, I'm now managed the team, I'm now manager of managers even. I think you will never be CTO if you don't change. And I was like, well, I don't want to be CTO, but okay, I'm going to listen to him. I respect him. He's just a smart person. And so I moved teams. And it was the first time where I'd properly come out of my comfort zone, where I was in a space that I didn't know. I joined what we had B2B at the time, so reselling all of our data, reselling our APIs, and I'd previously started in collecting all the data. So I was at kind of the other end of the spectrum, and I was totally out of my comfort zone. I felt at the time like, oh, this is going to reset me a year or so of career growth and everything. And the reality was, it was really the start of that career growth that I suddenly was like, oh, okay, ton of new things to know. These are different people. They don't know me. How do I land with them and everything? And then all of a sudden, 2 years in, and I'm like, oh, this is actually quite interesting, quite fun. And then I changed again. And I've done that every couple of years since then. And I quite often joke, I've got this kind of 2-year timer. If I've not learned something new, if not changed in that time, then I'll leave. And I'm still here now. Well, it's actually now 16 years later. So I think that moment, whilst at the time I was kind of more annoyed about it and more like, why am I doing this, has definitely helped accelerate my journey, at least.
Yeah, no, I love when people share those kind of things, because you're making the job interesting for yourself and challenging at the same time and stretching. Yeah. I think that's where a lot of people sometimes they hit that type of mark. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, and they sort of hit whatever the local maximum might be for them. And they either are too fearful maybe to try and take a risk and do something new. Maybe the opportunities don't emerge in their companies. Yeah. But, it's certainly one of the things I've certainly enjoyed when I was working in either growing businesses where you had the opportunity to do something different and, exercise or build a whole new set of muscles. Because over time, as you say, as you become more and more senior in these roles, it's often about guiding people who are going through their version of that sort of experience, right? Like maybe you start as a coder, but you're not going to be able to know code at the level that a new engineer does today. Or maybe you start in a product management role, but you can't prototype wireframes using a lovable anything like, a new sort of people who are in that role today. But you have these sort of set of patterns and methods and models and abstractions really that can really help people work their way through uncertainty. And if you don't experience all these different sort of stretch roles yourself, it's hard to have empathy for people, I feel, and actually help them with the best way you can, which is sometimes a bit of advice, sometimes a kick in the ass to get themselves moving, or something different. And I think that's a real important part of anyone's sort of leadership journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny, I think the thing that I quite often consider myself lucky that I've always had managers who I felt would support me no matter what the kind of change. And I think having the right environment to do that, as you said about, do some companies maybe don't have the space for people to grow and change, but I think it also comes down a lot to the culture. If you are, I think in many, when some more traditional companies penalized for moving around because they want real depth of knowledge, it's all about the outcome right now, then you're not going to have the support network in order to have that space and freedom. Whereas if you give people, as a manager, if you give people that set the expectations, give people the space, and make it safe to fail. Like I always felt if any of my jumps didn't work, I could go back. I could go back to that safety net and space. Now there might not have been a role in that way, but there would certainly have been the support, and we would have made something work. Which I think that's super important to create that environment.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, well, look, one of the things then is sort of top of mind for most people at the moment. You've been with Skyscanner from literally, like when I first met you and the team, it's probably like 30 engineers at the time.
Yeah.
And you were starting to adopt practices like continuous delivery and, product-based teams. You were doing all these great things. When you sort of think now how the world is sort of accelerating on this next innovation curve, like many people are looking at these ideas of using huge data sets, machine learning, AI intelligence, but not just necessarily for the business, but individually for leaders. Mm-hmm. As someone, you're obviously come from a technical background. You're obviously working with engineers that are building these things, but also challenging yourself about how I think these tools are becoming so accessible. I even started vibe coding over the weekend because I just got excited about not having to deal with how to set up a server, just getting in there and building stuff. So what are some of the things that have been exciting for you as someone in a CTO role with these tools coming online? And maybe something you've had to sort of unlearn or even relearn from the earlier parts of your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things in there. I think the conversation we had a couple months ago, one of my key takeaways was around the kind of need to look at yourself first, what you're doing around AI before you get to the implications for your immediate work and then for the company as a whole. And so I joked with the team, like I was researching which barbecue to buy, what the best new piece of tech, new speaker is, etc. And I was just going straight to ChatGPT, which is the simplest, easiest thing. But you do need to immerse yourself as an individual first, from a kind of personal point of view. Where I've then gone since then is, I guess a little bit of the unlearning is going back to the grassroots, like where are the teams doing things, and reading the blogs, going and speaking to the team, saying, hey, what are you doing? How are you using this? And then I get properly mind blown by teams using Cursor and Claude Code and things, and going like in a week they've done 9 front end POCs, and you're like, what? Like that would have taken you months beforehand, and now you're doing that in days. And so that was mind blowing in kind of what you can do with some of the kind of AI LLM side of things. But then it took me quite a long time, I suppose, to actually get to try it myself. And I started with a little bit of ChatGPT, just like I had this idea. I wanted to get the news, but I don't like the clickbait headlines of it. So I was like, right, give me the dull news. Maybe that's what I should call it eventually. And I started just like, ChatGPT, build me something. And I knew that it could do more because I'd seen that, you can actually do it. But I was tapping out. I was struggling to get it to do what I needed it to do. And then went back to some of the team and said, like, wait, where am I going wrong? What's not working? And a combination both of, you can do a lot of this still using a ChatGPT or a Gemini, but you need to get really good at the prompt, like really specific of what your product requirements are. And that makes me think back to, like 10 years ago, agile development, you have to get really clear at product requirements. And where have we probably drifted a lot over the years or kind of got a bit lazy, it's just that humans just talk, right? So product person comes up with an idea, says it out loud, engineer internalize it and goes, okay, I think that's roughly what you want to build. And then they iterate a lot. And that's, a lot of that is good, it's agile. But then in a world where actually having a proper spec, a clarity up front of what your product wants to do, what you want from it, is beneficial to humans, right? So it's a no regrets. Like if you can just get better at that interface, then you'll have a faster outcome. Oh, and by the way, then the AI can do a lot better with it. And that was my big kind of takeaway. It was like I went back, deleted all the stuff it had done for me, went back to the spec and was just like, okay, now I want it to do this, I want it to do this. And I got really specific about what it wanted. And then I threw it into Cursor and, went away, made a coffee. 20 minutes later, came back, answered a couple of questions it had asked me, and then left again. And before I knew it, I had an app and it was working. And I was like, oh, okay, right, sure. The journey in that way was not simple, but it certainly, I think, by talking to the teams, by realizing that it's not about just kind of hammering away and constant refinement. Getting it right up front is actually pretty important, and it's kind of irrespective of the tools, but you can do some pretty amazing things. And now what we're encouraging a lot of our teams is share. Like tell people what you've done, how did you do it, where did you go wrong? It's also completely fallible, and so there are lots of issues that crop up. So you need to know about them. You need to know what's wrong. A slightly different and bad example was I tried to get it to file my tax return, and I know enough about my tax return to know it got it wrong. And no matter how much I prompted it, it was not getting it right. And I was like, okay, well, at least I know that this is wrong, rather than blindly submitting it and getting a fine from HMRC. So, there are definitely areas you need to know enough to not be dangerous. But I think getting the balancing act there is pretty important. But yeah, definitely, it's been quite eye-opening of how much you can do. And it's not even what you're doing, it's really what the machine is doing for you, and you've just suddenly you can run multiple things in parallel. I could be doing my boring news app, and I could be doing 5 front-end POCs all at the same time. And the context switching, what do you need to, you said about what do you need to unlearn? You need to unlearn about context switching, because you can just let it go and do something, and you can be off deeply thinking about other stuff. You can come back to it whenever you like. It's not necessarily interrupting you, and those things that we've often as managers tried to get out of the way of teams, I think a lot of those things need rethought and revisited in terms of what makes a good and efficient, like highly functioning team.
Yeah, these are great, right? There's a couple of things I actually want you to unpack, because I think they're really important for other people who are in senior leadership roles like yourself. One is this idea of like architecting, if you will, the solution at the start, right? I think many people are still, they're excited, they're naive to the tool, and they just want to jump on and start hacking away and see where that leads. Versus, as you've described, this idea of actually thinking, what is this sort of ideal end state I want to get to, and really defining that, and then starting to play around. I think I'd love to ask you a couple of questions about that. And then just this other thing, which I think is really important for leaders, is that you've talked a little bit about this context switching, or in some respects, like you can compartmentalize work.
Yep.
And this idea that you can sort of say to yourself, right, my diary is a mess. Of course it's a mess, but I can put in 20 minutes here of like thoughtful collaboration work with the machine.
Yep.
And then leave it run for, while I have these next 15 meetings back to back for the rest of the day or whatever.
Yep.
And then I can come back to it. Right. And just talk, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your experiences there, because again, most leaders are in that world where their calendar is sort of bitty. They're not even thinking about not only designing what their workday looks like, but also understanding that they can hand these tasks off almost like they hand them off to teams,
Yep.
to say, go run this thing and come back to me with an answer or questions, and then we can do our next sort of feedback loop. So can you share a little bit about those similar but kind of different ideas and how you've sort of thought about them?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about autonomy at work, or specifically directed autonomy, and I think your second point there of being able to hand off. It's almost like you've got an extra teammate that you can hand over to. You hand it over, but you need to give it direction, right? You need to be very crisp and clear about the direction you want it to go. Now, you want to give it the outcomes. You don't want to dictate to it what to do, and that's exactly the same as you would with a human in that way. And you need to trust that it's going to go and do something, but you want to trust but verify. So you want to make sure you've got the right guardrails in place. All of that is directed autonomy, and that's no different to what you do with a human. It's just the way you do it that's different. So to the first point, we've started using Spec Kit, which is there are lots of them available. As everything in AI is evolving, there's probably a new one out this week.
Right now,
It's just been launched. Spec Kit seems to be one of the more mature ones, but you're basically trying to write up your product requirements to a degree, along with all of the guardrails, the variables, the outcomes. It's a little bit tripping back into waterfall in some ways, and I think that's always, people always see waterfall as a bad thing, but really when it comes to, like, if you could do waterfall fast, then that's not such a bad thing, right?
That's a bad thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Not a bad thing. So if you can get really crisp up front, you write your spec kit, your product PRDs, whatever. The thing I think, at least, it is so valuable about that is part of, at least from an LLM's point of view, you end up with non-deterministic code. So every time you run it, it could change a little, and you've got to get comfortable with that. But you've got to get comfortable with that, to get comfortable that you're not releasing something into wild that's going to be broken. If you go through lots of iterative loops, you're providing more context along the way, but you're also not sure that it's going to capture everything, right? That it's just the nature of LLM. So being really crisp up front and going almost back to the drawing board every time to say, okay, well, here are the 4 things that I missed up front. Okay, I'm going to add those back in. Things like what to test, what performance characteristics you want of a particular product. You could go as specific as the colors and the design system you're using, but you just got to get that up front. Now that goes very deep from a requirements point of view, but it also means that when you hand it off, you know that as long as it follows those, it's going to do its job. And I know this is will go public, but when we had our board meeting in Shanghai a few weeks ago, and before the board meeting, I was prepping, doing all the slides and all the stuff, and I was like, I really want to get this app going, and I just spent an hour beforehand just getting it going, and it ran throughout the board meeting. Like I was fully focused on the board meeting, but in the background, this app was being created. And then in one of the breaks, I looked back at it and I was like, oh, it's got a couple of questions for me. Type, keep going. So in the duration of our board meeting, I had produced this app. Well, I hadn't produced it. I'd asked the AI assistant to go and create it for me. And I just, that would never have happened in any other world. Like I would have, I might be able to type away at it, but I wouldn't have been present in the board meeting, which wouldn't be good for my job. But on the other side, I know it was for my own personal fun, but I learned a lot in the process of doing it, and that's the sort of stuff where it's game changing in terms of your productivity. Like I'm doing that from a personal point of view, but if I then that was me learning and on the journey to then I can start to code stuff for Skyscanner. And now I've said many years ago I'm never allowed near the code again. So maybe it's maybe the teams actually listen to me and don't let me do that. But our senior ICs, our senior architect-y people, we don't call them architects, but they're back in the code again. They're back developing software again. And the trend had been less and less of that and more into the kind of architecture, technical direction. And now they're rolling their sleeves up and back in again. And that's phenomenal. That's game changing in terms of how everyone thinks about things. And I think you said as well, you need a way to keep in touch with what's changing, what's going on, kind of in the code, so to speak. And the fact that those people can now do that without actually having to write a line of code is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and it's only going to lead to improved outcomes, right? Like they have better context of what the teams are doing, they understand it, and they're contributing as well, which is always a nice feeling for a lot of senior people when they feel like the more they get promoted, the further they get away from day-to-day execution. And that's why most people, I think, they found a lot of joy in that in their career, and there's a chance to sort of get back to that. But the thing that really, stood out from the story you were sharing, this idea of the ability to be almost working on things concurrently, but be fully present in the moment that you are, for me, is sort of one of the greatest unlocks of this, because I feel like the productivity is sort of table stakes. Yes, I'll get a little bit faster at something. Yes, if I'm more aware of what the teams are doing, I'll have better performance. But this idea of presence is massive for me. Like you were describing, you could be present in your board meeting, listening, being engaged, fully attentive. But on the side parallel, you have this little thread running that's just like working on another problem.
Yep.
And then when you have moments, when there are gaps in your calendar or time or space, you can suddenly be fully present with that thread again and give it a little bit of context, a little bit of direction, and it goes off and starts executing again. And for senior leaders, I think, because your time is so precious, it's fixed, so leverage of all of these 15-minute gaps, half an hour gap, 20-minute gap is massive. If you want to also have a normal life where you generally get up and go to work at 8 and go home around 6 or 7 and spend time with your friends, your family, your hobbies, that you can actually have a sort of real life and you're not just locked in to every piece of your day being replying to messages. And I think for me, that's the real promise of this. And, as you're describing these moments, like being fully present at board meetings, be present with a project that you're working on that's going to help you make progress. These are, for me, is the biggest promise of this stuff when people start to unlock it.
Yeah, you're totally right. And it's funny, I've got 3 small kids, so my time out of work is pretty limited. But I found myself reaching for the kind of, what many years ago you would transcribe something and then you'd spend the time reading it and editing it and tweaking it. I'll just throw it into one of the, whether it's ChatGPT or Otter or something. I'll just quick voice note, a couple of minutes when I'm walking somewhere where, I've got a few minutes of spare time, and then I can come back to it and just go, can you draft me an email from that? Or can you turn that into a slide deck or something that the idea is quick to transcribe. That's always the benefit of transcription, right? It's a quite a natural way of doing it. But now you can actually do something with it as quickly, and that, as you said, like that gives a lot of time. Or I find that certainly from the family life side of things, I'm no longer sitting there thinking, I've got to go and spend an hour writing up emails and whatever. I can be more attentive at home, but also when the thoughts come to me, when you don't control when your brain switches off from work or not, then I can just go, okay, done, right, great, I'll come back to that tomorrow. And that's hugely powerful.
It is, and it gives people, I feel like an off-ramp. The way I think about these things now is that I'm just creating digital assets. Yeah. So these voice notes that you're describing, whether it's a half-baked idea, whether it like writing performance reviews for your team, something that everyone hates doing, but you put it on a voice note and as you're walking home and you can do 3 or 4 of them, and it's your words, it's your language, and it's actionable feedback for people, and these are, I think, again, these moments where you can find to be creating value even while you're walking home from work. So when you get back to your house, that's where you are now. That's the place that you're showing up the best you can be. And again, I think that's really important for senior leaders to feel like they're present in the moments where they're spending their time. And that can be work, that can be home, that can be hobbies. And again, I just think it makes you a better leader in person when you aren't carrying the baggage of the 5 emails you got to send when you're sitting down for dinner and people, your kids are asking you a question, but you're thinking like, hang on, do I have to send 2024's report or 25's report? Like it's just, that's frustrating.
Oh, it is. I think my wife would very much agree with you there of being a better person. Like if I don't switch off before I kind of get home, then I can be a grump. My head's still in work mode. And as you said, if you just throw all those thoughts out of your head, transcribe, video, voice note, whatever, then you are a better person. I feel more relaxed. I'm usually fairly relaxed, but I feel even more relaxed, and I can just be more present, which is hugely valuable from the work-life balance side of things.
So thinking then now, at the industry level, right? Like again, you're getting to experiment with a lot of this tools inside Skyscanner. You've been sharing lots of stories about what the teams are playing around with. You obviously have massive data sets in the travel space, which is again very unique to your business. So what are some of the things maybe as an industry, you've certainly had to unlearn along the way as a team, as a company, that you think could be useful for other people? As many of them are still, not reaping the rewards of any of these tools. They're hearing they're going to make them more efficient, faster, etc. But I think it's like 95% of these Gen AI projects are failing. So this famous MIT report now keeps saying so. Yeah. Do you want to share one or two lessons that you'd learned that you think would, if you met yourself a few years ago as you were starting this, what you would recommend to try?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is around cost. So everyone's jumped on the AI bandwagon, and it's an expensive bandwagon to be on.
Yes.
And as you said, you see all the headlines of what some companies have been doing, and I think you need to put yourself in their shoes and go, why are they doing what they're doing? And are they really doing it for the reasons that they're saying? Because, if you read about some companies doing layoffs for productivity, and that you actually really understand what productivity you get, those two things they don't equate, right? Where we've approached that is to say, we want to just make everyone better. We have ambitions longer than our arms, stretch out for miles in front of us, and so we just want to do more, and we always want to do more and more and more. And if you frame it that way, then there are a few things that kind of come to mind. So a lot of teams can go very quickly with just throwing out AI-based experiments. But our data science team come in very quickly and sprinkle a dose of cost reality and say, well, that what you've done there, yeah, it works, it's great, but we could build an ML model that is 1/10 of the cost and will do 95% of what you're doing. Great. Let's not stop people from doing the kind of AI experimentation, but let's make sure that we are also being sensible from a cost point of view. So that's
absolutely
things in the product at least. So we have things like, what's the best flight? I quite often use, I live in Edinburgh, so Edinburgh to London, a frequent route. If you're doing Edinburgh-London same day, you probably want an early morning flight out and the last flight back. You probably don't want checked luggage, so you can, but that's all an ML model, right? You don't need kind of an expensive LLM sitting on top of that. So there's a bit of pragmatism, I suppose, in the when to reach for the LLM toolkit versus the ML toolkit. And obviously those two things, the line gets more and more blurry over time, but I think it is a trap that a lot of companies have fallen into, just sprinkling LLMs on everything. And the second piece is really around your data moat. And we have a lot of data. We process billions of prices a day. That data is hugely valuable and interesting. We've done a few experiments with some kind of university partnerships we've had, where with enough data you can start to predict pricing. You can never be 100% accurate. I mean, the airlines themselves aren't 100% accurate. So, there's always going to be a degree of drift. But if you've got that data moat, you can start to do interesting things that you couldn't do 10 years ago, or even 2-3 years ago. So the volume of data combined with the kind of the models that you previously couldn't see, or the expense and complexity of the models that you previously ran would have prohibited you doing it. And one of them in particular, we had a partnership with Edinburgh University near us, and they'd come up with a model that was super accurate. It was amazing actually, but we couldn't productionize it at the level of accuracy that it had. So we were creative. We kind of dropped it down a little bit from an accuracy point of view, but that's okay for where we use it in our product. So again, it's a bit of that cost balancing act to kind of try and figure out what the right thing to do is. And then the kind of people side of things, I suppose, is the third thing I think of. The productivity gains of purely from a software engineering point of view, the coding element are still relatively small. You can absolutely, as I was saying earlier, you can get some code out that would have taken you weeks to do beforehand, and you can now do that in a matter of hours. But that's also not where most software engineers spend their time. They spend it in discussions, in all the other thousands of things that go into building a kind of world-class product. And so you kind of need to look at the whole software delivery lifecycle, right from that ideation, user research side of things, the financial modeling associated with this product going to be valuable. Does it serve travelers well? Like for us, we put travelers at our core. And so if it's not going to help a customer, then why are we doing it? And so you can take that the whole way through there, all the way into the actual, the building piece, and then into experimenting and running it. And there are some companies out there, the likes of Shopify, who I look at, and I try and spend a lot of time reading and talking to other companies about what they're doing, who've gone all in across the whole journey. And that's where I think you start to get real value. It's not the engineers can just produce code faster. It's I can do user research faster. I was chatting to one of our designers the other day, and he's like, can I get a cursor or Claude Code license so I can just start to go and change there's some design errors on the product. Can I just get a license to go in and change them myself? I'm like, absolutely, amazing, right? But that's a designer who's got no depth of coding, depth of technical background, or he might do, and not. I don't know if he does, but
we'll find out is the answer.
we'll find out, right? Because he'll just go in, and I'm like, wow, we need more of you, please, more inquisitive, interested in blurring the lines of the traditional kind of engineer does the how bit, product does the what bit, and designer makes it all look nice. And the fact that all those lines start to blur more, I think is why it's quite important to make sure that the whole life cycle is AI enabled or is AI native, maybe more to the point, because that's where I think you really get the productivity unlock. And you also got to make sure you don't pigeonhole people, because that's the thing that traditional roles and responsibilities, I do this, you do that. That all changes. That all has to change, and that you have to unlearn your boundaries. You have to understand them still. Like where do you best show up? But you need to understand that those lines are going to blur, and you need to get quite comfortable with being uncomfortable in terms of like, I might actually make some design changes in production myself as an engineer, and I have got no idea about design, but that doesn't matter. It's okay. And a designer might come along and say, can you change this, can you change that? But if they can go into the code and do it themselves, well, you've got a win-win combination. So I think kind of not totally throwing out the rule book on roles and responsibilities, but certainly allowing yourself to drift out of your traditional swim lanes is going to be a big thing that I can see changing already, and hopefully more and more companies take on that mindset.
Yeah, these are great tips. Like one of the things we learned in Nobody Studios, where we're building these early stage companies, is we can make prototypes all day, but like once you productionize it, it's a whole different ball game. It's like token spending out of control, and it's like, so I love the way you're describing this as, you have these teams that are not just coming up with ideas, but there's real like rigor around financial modeling to sort of go, right, like, are the economics going to work? Not just is the engineering going to work? That I think is a huge piece for people to understand, because to your boring news app, the clickbait headlines are just, I built this in 20 seconds and I've $20 million in the bank, but it cost you 25 billion to run it. So like, what's the point, But that's not the message that's coming through to the market right now. So I think it's fantastic to hear you share that as well. And I do love this idea of just challenging people to blur the lines between their roles and responsibilities now. There's, like you say, whether you're an architect and you're getting back to coding, or, you're a failed engineer like me who ended up in product and now thinks I can write code again. It's an exciting time. It makes work interesting again, and for me, that's actually what great people do. They keep trying to push their boundaries a little bit. How can make a small contribution that actually removes that task from the ticket line for engineers? So engineers are on their highest leverage work as well. And if you can make a small CSS change or HTML change as a designer, it's just one less thing that's in the ticket queue, and the team's moving forward, And I think those kind of like micro wins, they just stack and stack and stack and stack. And really, for me, that's what these high performance teams start to look like, is people know where they can contribute, that, there's awareness of that, there's boundaries, there's management to it.
Yep.
But it's also encouraging people to get a little bit outside their comfort zone and give this stuff a try.
Totally, but it's interesting you say that, of the kind of, put it into Jira or whatever your favorite ticketing system is. Like, those are all the things where engineers spend or lose a lot of time. The handover, the handoff even of design says, here's the CSS change, writes it into a Jira ticket, takes a screenshot. That's all time, and it might seem like micro wins, but it is contextually complex. And if you just remove all of that kind of the small bits, then everyone is working on something that's more impactful. The designers, the time it takes them to write the Jira ticket, they've fixed the CSS bug, right? It's that level of improvement. I don't know why anyone would want to still work in the way we have, but we've created process. We've spent years training everyone to work in a process-driven handoffs, gates, etc. And I think that's the thing that probably people need to unlearn the most, is around the process side of things. Just most of the traditional handoffs are or should be blurred, or are. Do you need a ticketing system anymore if you can just fix it yourself? Like, probably not. Maybe you want the traceability of it to make sure that you're audited properly, but really just get the AI to auto-generate a ticket for you. Like, it's we're in such a anchored so much in the past of process, and yet you really do need to seriously consider it all in the kind of what's going to be different a year, 2 years from now, or even next month.
Yeah, like, again, one of the things that I keep coming back to is this idea of creative work versus the time sinking but necessary work. And you've given a great example there where, again, this designer could execute a change and the AI could write the Jira ticket to keep the auditability.
Yeah.
And it's movement, right? It's people doing their best work, their most leveraged work, and it's automation that just captures the audit of that work.
Yep.
And for me, that's another huge unlock for companies. And, for me, I just keep getting more excited about it in these times. Listen, it's been absolutely amazing to catch up, have a chat, hear the things you've been doing, hear about the things you continue to work on and have fun. What's one thing that you're most looking forward to now over the next, I'm going to say 12 months, simply because that's how fast I think this stuff is changing. Is there something ahead for you that you're like, I can't wait to sort of get in and see what this is going to do?
I mean, I said, a lot of our senior IC community are back at the coalface, and I think that is honestly the most interesting thing I think is going to change. I think it's not even 12 months. I think in the next 3-4 months, we're going to see the vast majority of our team back coding, and it's not that they've all stopped, right? Like, obviously, but they're going to be back with a Cursor, a Claude Code, a ChatGPT, or whatever your favorite is, and they're going to be shipping outcomes. And I think as a business, we've drifted over the last few years into very much like output. It's like, it is the Jira ticket. It's like, make this change, do this thing, and you slightly become a feature factory.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to do. Absolutely.
It's so easy, and yet that really disconnects you from why are you showing up at work, what's your impact. So it's not, what's exciting is not so much the potential game changing of the output in terms of like what you can actually change, but it's getting people tied back to outcomes again. Why are you making these changes? What's the impact you're trying to have? And that, from a human point of view, that's inspiring. That's the best, right? That's like, I still love working here because I love travel. I love helping people travel and every bit of that. We do flights, hotels, cars, packages, you name it. And that's the whole ecosystem of travel. So tying people back to the outcomes again, and yet also giving them this massive accelerant from a personal impact point of view, I think you're going to see more engaged, more excited people. The flip side is there will be some people who aren't engaged by that, and I think that's a harsh reality of. I remember there was a quote many years ago of like a garage mechanic being like, "Oh, it's terrible that all these electric vehicles are coming onto the road. It's going to put me out of business." And you're like, "No, you're putting yourself out of business if you don't learn, if you don't adapt and retool, relearn or unlearn." Like, you need to now do electrical mechanics as well as the physical pieces, and that's what will keep you in business and make you accelerate. And it's the same here, right? It's the same in the whole of the software industry. This is people's chance to learn new skills, learn new tools, get back to outcomes, and I think that's going to happen faster than 12 months. I think we're certainly talking in like the next quarter or so that we think we will be able to start that shift. Might take us a year to kind of fully engage, fully turn it around, but that's what excites me the most for sure.
Awesome. Well, look, it's been great to have you on the show. Thanks for sharing so openly the stories, your own personal journey. I know there's many more years ahead of you in this, and keep building awesome stuff. So thanks again for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Barry. It was great to catch up.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.